Hello, members. This is Tom Morrison from the Metal Treating Institute. Glad to have y'all back here. We're live from Nashville, Tennessee, here in my home and my dining room, as I'm sure a lot of you are listening from your home as well. We're glad you're taking the time to be here. I want to inform everybody, if you look down to your right or look down at the bottom, you'll see a chat button. If you click that, you will see the chat box pop up on the right. And we'd really encourage you, as you're listening to Mary and Buster and Glenn talk, if you have any questions or any comments or things you'd like to comment on, please feel free to type in the bottom right there. It says type message here, and click that through and let us see your questions and your comments. And we'd love for people to just type in there where you're listening from so we can see who's on the line. So if you can, do that. But we're excited to be here today to talk about some best practices in payroll, payables, and bankers, how to deal with them. All three of those are huge items going on right now as people's businesses are constricting, and the COVID-19 crisis is really in our face right now. So what I'd like to do first is have each of our panelists kind of share with the members who they are and where they're from and how long they've been a member of MTI. So Mary, let's start with you from the Midwest.
Hi, I'm Mary Springer, Thermtech of Waukesha. I've been a MTI member for a long time, probably going on 27 years. And I'm a past president and current chair of the Scholarship Foundation.
Awesome, thanks, Mary. And I know the foundation's doing some great work. I know we're slated to give away another $51,000 this year, which is tremendous. So Buster, let's go with you. Out in the Southwest.
Buster Crossley with Texas Heat Treating in Round Rock, Texas. We've been a member of the MTI since the mid-1980s. And I'm also a past president, and I'm also I'm now the treasurer of the Educational Foundation.
Awesome. I know people are looking forward to you handing over that money to those kids this year, Buster.
Yeah.
Glen out west.
Glen Ottinger with ThermoFusion. I'm CEO here. Been a part of the MTI the last 12 years, and Hayward's just south of Oakland, California, not too far from San Francisco either. Awesome.
Well, glad you three are taking the time to be here. I know members are loving hearing real life. What are people thinking and some best practices? So Mary, I want to start with you, and Glenn and Buster, feel free to chime in on this question, but I know no one can predict how long this is going to last. But in terms of planning for cash flow, for payables, for just trying to get your business to the other side of this thing, how long do you think people should be thinking about to be able to withstand till business gets to some sense of normality, back to where I actually see cash flow picking up, customer usage and stuff? How long should they be looking at?
Well, my opinion is 6 months to 9 months at this point, because while we're all maybe bobbing along doing okay, or a lot of us right now, as the supply chain continues to change and people stop buying things, and there's going to be a delayed effect, in my opinion, that we might see the worst of this maybe toward fall. We might be back up and running, but some of the impact to the supply chain might take a while to catch up. And I'd invite the others to give their opinions.
I know, Buster, as we were going through this call, you were talking about just kind of a timeline of, how business happens, how people are extending when they pay, and when you're actually going to get paid for stuff. So share some of that with the members.
Well, heat treating is at the end of the food chain in the manufacturing world. So, if business doesn't come back starting in June, and so you don't start seeing those jobs to mid-June, into June, and then if your payables are now being stretched out 30, 60, or 60, 90 days, so it may be August, or September before you do start seeing some of that money. So that, that's going to cause a problem in your accounts receivables.
Yeah. Now, Glenn, we talked about the kind of the road, how this is affecting the supply chain. Kind of give us your thoughts about how you feel the supply chain could be impacted.
Well, we're all interconnected, so I think we'll be seeing a lot of kind of surges and pauses as we move forward. Nobody really knows what the demand is going forward, and I also think we'll see some stuff reshored to the U.S. just if China's going to continue to have problems, and I know a lot of businesses out here were disrupted during the initial outbreak and now are trying to catch up and can't get their goods out of China. So I think we'll see some things be brought back to the U.S.
Has any of y'all seen anything yet come back to the U.S. in any frame or any talk of it?
We've seen some jobs that we know were offshore that we're starting to see. They're not big, but they're critical.
Right.
And so we're getting some opportunity there. Also, noticed some of the captives we're around Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and some of the captive businesses around there are starting to look for some more outsourcing. So
That's good stuff.
What that is, some places, some of the bigger places are shutting down. So there's a lot going on. Every day has been really interesting. And I'm not sure what it all means yet.
Well, for the heat treating community, I would suspect this is one of those things where bad things create opportunity, where, you're talking to your local customers out there that you've always wanted to do business with, but they've always done it in-house. Could be an opportunity to show them how you could bring value to them in this moment, for sure. So Buster, let's talk now. So now we've talked about 6 to 9 months that you got to be prepared for to really kind of muscle through. I know bankers, man, they hold the money. I know they're part of the PPP process. And so Buster, you made a comment when we were preparing for this. It's like, don't be late to the party, because you need to be talking to your bankers now. So what are some of the checklist things members need to be talking about with going to their bankers and kind of getting them to be their partner in this process?
Well, it's not only your bankers, but it's also your suppliers and your payables, people that hold notes, maybe on your trucks or your forklift or insurance. We've talked to all of them, and we've talked about, payment deferrals, some notes, maybe paying the interest only. So it's not, I know that a lot of people, it's not that you really need it now, but I think you got to remember one thing, that cash is king in these types of scenarios, in a pandemic. So with that in mind, with cash, being king, you got to preserve that cash and do what you can to preserve it, because nobody knows how long this is going to last. And I don't think that work is going to come back all at once. I mean, that's my personal opinion. I think it's going to come back in waves, or in segments. So we're preparing for 6 to 9 months down the road, just not knowing what's going to happen. And I think that depending on what segment of the industry that you serve, you'll see some industries revive faster than others.
So what about if you've got all your money in one bank, or if you kind of talked a little bit about with me about, when we talked about this, spreading your money amongst a number of banks. I mean, any thoughts on that?
Well, that's just kind of a lesson learned from our last downturn in the Southwest. We serve the oil and natural gas industry. It's an up and down thing, and so it's just something that we learned. We started looking at spreading our money out as opposed to several. Instead of one bank having all of our eggs in one basket, we spread it out amongst 2 or 3 banks. So now I know sometimes there's loan covenants that may prevent some of that, or that you may have to have a certain level of deposits, but loan covenants too are negotiable. So but yeah, I think that's a strategy that if things get really tight, you don't want the bankers start pulling the strings and trying to run your business for you.
Right. So is that the big reason why to have multi banks, just so you're not tied to any one set?
Yeah, I heard in the last webinar with Jim Oakes, he was talking about some of the medium-sized banks. They're more serviceable, they're more customer oriented, and we too have found that to be true in this area. So we've instead of looking at big national chain banks, we've targeted more of the mid-sized banks.
Yeah, I know as we've gone into the PPP, I know that Bank of America got a bad deal out there in social media, because if you didn't have a loan with them prior, no matter what your deposits were, you didn't get to file with them. And they've since changed that and made it a simple process. But the larger banks have not been as nimble as the smaller. And I know, Mary Glenn, it looked like y'all had some comments on this as well.
Yeah, we've always been kind of worked with a small business bank, and that's served us well. Getting back to the cash management piece, one thing that we decided to do on the day we could do it is apply for the maximum payroll protection loan that we could, because we don't know what's coming up down the road. In the case of taking those loans, I guess the best news is that you don't need it and you don't use it and you just give it back to them.
Right.
But we want to be prepared for anything right now. And so whatever programs, like Buster said, talk to your bank about how they're going to treat you in a down economy. Make sure that you have an understanding up front. I talk to my bank every other day lately just to see what's going on with, the loan application and any things that are coming up. This SBA process, if you did apply for that loan, make sure you're talking to the loan originator a lot, because every day they get asked for more information and the documentation is still being developed. So it's a very fluid situation. But in terms of banking relationships, I see Buster's point about spreading it out if you can. It's a little difficult, like in our situation, because of, like you said, covenants and all those things that tend to limit some of your ability to move. But
Right.
It's not a bad point.
So, so talking about bank covenants, digging into that a little bit, is there things best practices that members should be thinking through and looking at what they should or should not do, or things they need to be aware of when it comes to the bank covenants in this moment?
Buster's point about negotiating, I think, is important. Sometimes if you don't ask, you don't know what can be done.
Right.
And at this point, you already have a covenant in place and a relationship. So I think knowing what your covenant says, I know some manufacturers out here are concerned about debt offsets, where they can basically pay back your loan with your operating account. And that's another reason to have multiple banks, because they can't go between banks. But if you have your operating account with Wells Fargo and a loan, they can just cancel that loan. I think they'll also, if you're not communicating, like Mary and Buster were saying, they'll cut your credit line or eliminate it without you knowing. So I think talking to your banker weekly or every other day, that's a great start. And I think making a compelling narrative. So I think all bankers know that April's probably going to look bad for most businesses, but then keeping them in the loop, if it strings out longer, just letting them know why and what you're doing. I think although they want to see the financial statements, a lot of it's feel and confidence and how much they trust you.
Don't ever underestimate the narrative, because a lot of times the bank has to sell you in a lot of cases to their board or whoever their decision-making group is. And the more you can arm them with facts and figures, the better you're going to look. And they're happy to present you in a positive light if they know your situation. So whenever I prepare for the bank, I include a lot of details in the narrative about who we are, what heat treating is, who we are in heat treating. And it really, all the feedback I get is that, wow, we didn't really realize, why you wanted the money.
Right.
And who your customers are, right? I've been telling them about approvals with Honeywell and SpaceX, Tesla.
Certifications,
All you got to do is imagine that you're on Shark Tank, right?
That's
all
right.
you got to do. It's kind of a little opposite. I would encourage members to watch Shark Tank if they aren't, because I learned so much about what questions people are asking about manufacturing, where's it's going, how do you look at things from a business perspective. So there's a lot of practical things looking through the minds of the people on the Shark Tank of how they ask things. They're really a banker's mind in that.
I know you have a question down the road about using MTI's monthly sales reporting. It kind of fits here that when you're preparing that presentation, I always include who we are, how many heat treaters are in our region, that report, and just kind of paint a picture of the landscape for them so they know who we are in the world, and what the size of all of the heat treaters who report sales, how much heat treating is there. It gives them kind of a scope of what heat treating is, because most of them have no idea.
So Mary, explain a little bit, connect the dots to the members who might be listening who are not in it, why it's powerful to be showing. I remember one time you're indicating back in 2009, you told the story of your banker wasn't totally on board, we'll say something, but you showed him that your sales might be down say 20%,
Right.
but your market
But
share
the
was
market share
greedy.
piece is what's so important there, because you can demonstrate that if you're having a bad year or quarter, by comparing, the market share data and showing that your market share is not changing.
Right,
It's just that the pie got smaller during this
right,
period of time for whatever reason, and tied into the economics. It makes them know that you're still running a sound ship,
right.
and you're doing your best. It's just, and the trends too, the sales forecasting, that's a real powerful tool to show. I used this last one a lot, and it was pretty right on, except for this COVID thing that
Right,
we got a dip. The dip stayed dipped longer than we thought, but
right.
it's at least you've got some data behind what you're saying, and it's more powerful that way.
Yeah, I think digging into it, giving your banker a part of that, because it also, for members that don't know, the program actually ranks you in your local region of everybody reporting as well as nationally. So when you can show that your ranking is at the same or going up through these times, they can see that you're not losing really anything. Like you said, the pie is getting smaller. So I'd encourage any members listening to really, if you want, you can go to our website at heattreat.net and click on benefits on the tab and click on monthly sales reporting. And there's a link there that you can fill out that help us set up your account for you and get you involved in that. It's really good stuff. So Glenn, you talked a little bit about the debt off and I know, is there something called a cash sweep? Is there a difference between the two that you could explain to members? We talked a little bit about that.
Not too much, just that they'll take your cash and apply it to your debts.
Right.
If there is a credit crunch, which I think what the government's trying to do is making sure that the cash keeps flowing and that people don't start grabbing it and causing a credit crunch where the bank's calling in loans and
Right.
then your operating account to offset it.
So the last question on the whole banking thing is there any things that you could say when you go to talk to them, these are things you should not do? Are there any best practices that you've learned in your experience that you should not do in these times when you're dealing with the bank?
Well, you've got to ask for money before you're out of money, right? Banks only like to
Right.
have money, unfortunately, which seems kind of contradictory, but that's the way it is. So I think like Mary and Buster were already saying, planning 6-9 months out, looking at worst case scenarios, asking before you need it, asking now because your first quarter probably looks pretty strong and you can show them those numbers. I always like to think about when I'm talking to the banker, I'm giving them my highlight reel, like what's
Right.
going, not muddying them down and my fears are.
That's right.
Don't panic with your banker. That's a bad idea.
It's your financial Facebook, right?
Right. If something scares you that you're seeing out there, I wouldn't mention it too much.
Right. So a question that comes to mind, most the members that are here today really withstood 2009 and 10 pretty well, and some just skated through, but they made it. So is it worthwhile to show a trended history that shows how, kind of how we're a strong company, we have all the things taking place, we're not losing market share. And let me show you how we did that in 2009 to show the narrative that when it comes to a down economy, we know how to perform in that to get you your money back. Is that worthwhile for anybody putting
Absolutely.
that story together?
Yep.
Certainly.
I think so.
Yeah,
Okay.
my banker also said getting your financial statements in timely. He doesn't want to have to chase you down. Offer them up. Don't make them hound you, because I think that just puts about a little bit of fear and doubt in their mind as well.
Makes them wonder what are they not wanting to tell us up front. So let's shift from banking to now operational in terms of payables, receivables, and stuff. I know that's really two other tough things to manage inside of these kind of times. So either one of y'all speak to how you're seeing those play out and how you feel people listening should take a look at those.
Well, I think what worries me the most is, you look at your receivables on your P&L statements, and what are those really worth? Or what will they really be worth? Will you be able to collect all of that? And so that's another problem that you probably, you need to get extremely aggressive on your receivables, because We've already had one customer shut their doors, say we're not reopening with a job in house. And so I just think that that's it's a really important part of it in trying to project, what your true receivables will be after this is said and done. And obviously the longer it goes, I think the worse that picture will get.
Right. Mary, Glenn, anything to add?
It's the receivable picture. I think you can't stress enough, because the bank too is pretty aggressive about not having confidence in older receivables, even in a good economy. So if customers, and everyone's going to be hoarding cash. Nobody's going to want to let go of a lot of cash. So it's definitely going to turn into more of a squeaky wheel situation. So it might be a good practice to assign somebody to squeak in your organization to make those calls and stay on top of people who are getting past your terms. We used to not call until, maybe we were getting closer to 50 days or something, but now we're trying to crank everybody to terms and keep them there. People will be honest. It's always hard when you have a good customer to really try to, during these harder times, to say, no, you're not getting your order till I get some money. But most people will do what they can. And if you have an ongoing conversation with customers who are having problems, take a little when you can get it and try to just keep the dialogue open. And chances are when they have money, you'll get what you're asking for.
Yeah, it really is kind of a four-edged sword with customers, vendors, banks, and yourself to get all that stuff together and working it together. So it's a fine balance to see how can everybody give a little to get through this time, because we all have to do that together.
An ongoing conversation too kind of helps you to know if you do have any really big problems coming up.
Right.
If you're talking to them about what's going on, they might offer, oh, we're about ready to close, or we just got a big order, or something that might either make you more comfortable or make you less comfortable.
Right. So I mean, I would venture to say all of y'all would say that you should probably be talking to your banker, like you say, Mary. You're doing it every other day, but at least once a week, just to call in and check in and see how things are going, and maybe provide them any financial stuff that we're giving out that can show them where the industry stands and how it's looking and what we're doing.
I think once a week is good.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit now further down in the operations. I know, Glenn, I know for all y'all, anytime you make decisions in your business based on fear and anxiety versus confidence and knowledge, you tend to want to cut and do things that you probably wouldn't do if you were thinking logically. So I know in this moment, there's probably things people are trying to cut or not wanting to cut. I mean, in order for you to withstand this, because you got to have strength through this time, you can't create a weak business in this moment. This is when your business has to actually step up and be really strong. So is there any things that go through your mind of things that if you're going to cut things, here's some things that you definitely don't want to cut. Here's some things you might think about cutting. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. All the cuts are hard, and none of them are obvious or easy, or you would have already done them. So I think looking at anything that's going to help you come out stronger, because I still do think, at least here in California, when the shelter in place is removed, I think there'll be a surge of work, and we want to be ready. So we've already taken down a few furnaces and upgraded some components, just fix some things that we haven't had the time to fix due to uptime. And so we're doing that. We're 5S in some areas when it gets slow. It's hard to predict what's coming. Kind of all the natural rhythms of the customers have been disrupted.
Right.
So those are the things we're at. And then I know Mary had some good ideas. I think the one other thing that surprises me is our team is really willing to step up. Like our employees are really rising to the occasion. I know Mary had some good feedback with that as well.
Yeah, that was going to be the next item I want to jump into was payroll. And I know, Mary, you've done some I want to have you share how you've really used an innovative way to get your management to buy into that.
Well, we want to keep our team together. And in terms of what not to cut, I think most of us are in agreement that you're going to keep your key people no matter what. And we want to keep as many of our skilled people as we can. So I went to each of our department heads and asked them, I gave them a number. I said, here's where we have to get. You tell me how you can get your department there. And be it, cutting hours, laying someone off, doing a rotating layoff where everybody takes a month or a couple of weeks, or people taking pay cuts. You tell me what's going to work for your team. And I was surprised with, in all cases, they met the goal. And a couple of the department heads offered to take pay cuts because they said they're people, they had people who couldn't afford to. Sometimes people said, oh, I'll take a layoff for 2 months. I don't mind being home right now. So it's interesting if you turn it on people to let them help you. We got more than we asked for. I think
That's great.
Felt good about it.
That's great. Anything offered there, Buster? Anything on your side?
No, I mean, that's pretty much the philosophy we have. I mean, we obviously have a team of people that, they'll be walking out the door at the same time I will if it ever comes to that.
Right.
So you just don't let your key people go. Everybody knows in this industry, you don't hire knowledge very easily. It doesn't come every day. So, we have a team of people and a team of skilled people that we just don't, it's off limits. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't do some other things, and maybe hour reductions or some of the things that everybody else does. But, it's tough, and those decisions are tough. How to cut, and because you're talking about you're cutting livelihoods. But as Mary said, people have understood because they see it. You just go home and watch the news, and they see what's going on, and it's just it's unprecedented. And so and you certainly can't miss it.
Well, I would think, and I'd like y'all's input on this. So one of the unfortunate opportunities that's going to be out there, you just said you can't hire knowledge off the street in heat treating traditionally, but in 4 months, that may be the case, depending on how many people get laid off. I mean, if you're actively marketing in your community, looking for good people, you may be able to pick up some of those people. I mean, any thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, I guess you're right. It's hard to imagine that world because we haven't lived in it for such a long time. But I would imagine that if you're able to hire, that you could probably find some good people right now and maybe coming out of this. The unemployment line can't, even though unemployment benefits sound like, they're pumping them up and paying more, when there's millions of people applying for unemployment, I can't believe, that the processing has got to be at a snail's pace. It's going to be a difficult world.
Well, that's what I've heard looking at a lot of my friends' stuff. That's what they're experiencing. So we've talked about the bankers, we've talked about payables and receivables. So now let's get into to the government assistance part of it, the payroll protection program. I mean, I assume y'all are trying to tie into that. I know a lot of members are. We're actually going to be asking a question next week on our little check-in that we do now. How many people have tied into it to see how many are actually doing that. I mean, any experiences, any thoughts to give the members of what I know most people say they've gone online, they've filled out a lot of the paperwork, but they've not seen any action in terms of getting anything back. I mean, any thoughts?
I talked with our bank just this morning because I told him I was doing this and, would he have any fresh thoughts or up to the minute info? He said the biggest thing that he sees right now is that a lot of banks are having trouble creating the SBA language to document the loan. So the applications are filed, but the SBA hasn't been forthcoming with here's the loan documents that are going to allow the bank to give us the money.
Right.
So as I understand it, groups of banks are putting those documents together, and they're hopeful that they'll have something like that. My banker said it's possible that you'll actually see money by the early part of next week. That they're getting to the point where things are getting clear. He said with some of the larger banks, not so much because it depends on the bank's relationship with the SBA to begin with.
Right.
And Wells Fargo and some of the other big ones are putting caps on how many PP loans they'll do.
Right.
And some of the bigger banks are also capping the numbers of employees like to 50 rather than the 500.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on your banking relationships, it can vary what you're seeing in terms of speed, how fast the application gets processed, or if it gets processed, and how fast you'll see the money. It's hard to say. That no promises right now, I guess.
Well, I was smiling because I could imagine members just tweeted out what you said. Mary's banker said we're going to get money next week. We're going to be good to go.
He did say, don't quote me on that.
right. There's hope in the wind, for sure. So Buster,
they are making progress.
Yeah, that's good. Buster, Glenn, anything on that?
Well, that's my opinion is whether you think you need it now or not, that you probably should be preparing for that, or at least being prepared for the second round. I understand they're trying to get a second round because Jim Oakes was giving some statistics the other day in his webinar about how many small businesses there are in the United States and how much money there is. And, you know, if you're not being proactive and you may be on the outside looking in and to go, when you really do need it. And then when you really do need it, that's when it's almost too late. And that's where it's going to be a problem. So preparation, preparing. That's all I can say. I mean, it's.
Well, I like your comment early on. Don't be late to the PPP party.
Right.
Get in early, talk to your bankers early, talk to your vendors early, and definitely file for this early so you can get into that. Just because, I mean, you may not need the cash today, but like you said, in another quarter, that could all change dramatically.
And I have been told by one of my bankers that that the bank examiners have told them that they need to be willing in working with your their customers.
Right.
Whether that's with loans or whatever whatever it is. So, and we found that to be true.
Yeah, and a key thing I think for everybody is to really try and understand the dynamics around when is it going to have to be paid, because I understand it's 1% payback over like 10 years, but if you have if over 75% of the money is used for payroll and you've not let anybody go between now and 6 months from now, that it can be then turned into a grant, which means it's forgiven and you don't have to pay it back. So you want to be very clear on what that wording is and how you understand that.
That's ambiguous.
Yeah, for sure. So now, so that gets us through that. So apply, like they said, apply for all you can and get in early. Now let's talk a little bit about, I'm not sure if any of y'all have been, I know a lot of people are probably wanting to not talk about COVID-19 any longer and the graphs and the curve. What they really want to talk about is kind of what's next. If things do turn and we are back in the, building slowly but surely 4 to 6 months from now, have y'all begun talking about what's next when it comes back, and any comments offered up to members as to what they should be talking with their teams and their employees and their vendors about what's next when this thing does make a turn?
Hopefully we'll be busier, trying to get caught up, but it's just so hard to say. I think we'll all be in better shape if we've been using this downtime to clean up and keep our equipment in tip-top shape. We'll be ready to perform. I just really don't know what it's going to look like.
Well, right now, we have in our world, we have the Saudis and the Russians having a pissing contest,
Right.
And so, it's really out of our control, and it's, we're kind of at the mercy of what happens there.
Right.
So I don't know. It goes back to what I earlier said. I don't think that all industries are going to come back at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's going to be the drive of the engine that gets started first, but I would suspect, just based on history, that our industry would probably be one of the last lagging industries.
Okay.
We're outside the oil and gas, so it's a little different. Yeah, it's kind of a double whammy for you, Buster. But I think there'll be some pent-up demand. We're already seeing some of our customers ramping some, if they're in a critical business, sending us more work, even though we're still under the shelter in place. So I'm optimistic that there'll be a lot of pent-up demand from backlog of orders. Of course, some may be canceled, but I'm optimistic that we'll come out strong.
We have a mixed bag of customers, and I think what we always find when oil and gas is off, that the tentacles of that market are deep. Sometimes people that you don't think are reliant on that industry end up, getting really slow in manufacturing. And there's a lot of manufacturing up here. Everybody had been a little slow going into, coming out of the first quarter. We weren't expecting a barn burning second quarter by any means. So we're a little concerned that summer was going to be slow had this not happened. And with this going on, it's just hard to say.
Yeah, I've tried to listen to a whole bunch of people talking about what's next. And what I really believe, when you look at the lessons, because everybody kind of talks about this new normal, and I really don't believe we're in a new normal, because this isn't a financial thing. You look at 9/11 and the 2009 financial crisis, people went back to their old norms pretty quickly, because the old normal is what was normal, and people were spending their money. So I think what was going on before January 20th, when we left our board meeting in Key West, and this is a blip in the screen, and as soon as it does turn, I'm with Glenn that I think you're going to see some pent-up demand. I think it's imperative that members listening to this and that hear this, go look at every one of your industry markets. I heard this from another guy. Go look at every one of your industry market segments and look at where they were prior to this, and look at the ability, like the hotel restaurant industry. People are dying to travel, and they're dying to go out to eat. They're dying to do some of they're really wanting to do a lot of those things that they used to do. And I think those will be areas, and they want to buy certain things as soon as they get jobs back. So look at your industry segments and ask yourself the question, do we feel like these areas are ones that we're doing business with that can come back quickly, or is it going to be slow? And that'll kind of help you know where to put your assets, people, and resources to do that.
We're in a market where there's, in northern Wisconsin, up around Green Bay, there's a lot of paper industry. So we have a couple of large customers that serve the paper industry who are going gangbusters right now. But when everyone doesn't know what to do with their closets full of toilet paper, we might see a decline, where in things that are going hard right now. So be interesting.
Yeah, and another interesting factor is going to also be, so as a lot of people are on unemployment, you've got the Amazons of the world who want to hire 100,000 people. CVS Pharmacy said they're in the hire of 50,000 people. If they're hiring some of the people that might be coming from our plants, we could see the payroll or the unemployment go down pretty quickly, as well as it went fast, depending on how fast those ramp back up. And will those employees that are some of your line personnel actually be there when you come back? Because if they're already working in another place, depending on the offers they're getting, I mean, that's something I don't think anybody's thinking through a lot, is where are these people going?
If things slow down on their end, and they don't have to be restocking grocery stores every night, then they're going to be let off, and things will move back over. True,
for sure. Well, we're coming around to the hour, so I wanted to just say, so I think it's been great information. So I'll let each of you say any parting comments you'd say to the members, encourage them about where they're at, and maybe anything you think they should be paying attention to.
I'd say being as encouraging as you can. It's hard when you're having a bad day and you're feeling pretty negative, not to project that, and encourage your staff and management to do the same. Help people solve their problems, that come up on a day-to-day at home, and just be positive. A little positivity goes a long way right now.
Glenn?
Yeah, I think two things would be that, this is hard on everybody. So people that are stalwarts at our company, I've noticed things getting under their skin, or they're a little grumpy. So it's like Mary said, encouraging them, listening to them, being a kind of an advocate for them, keeping them positive. And then we're really focused on just how do we come out of this as strong as possible. There's going to be some downside. There's going to be hard decisions, but coming out strong on the other side is the goal.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Buster?
Well, I think, the longer that we're in this, it's going to be harder to come out of it, but, not being scarred in some form or fashion.
Right.
But to be positive in that environment, it is tough. That's a tough job. and, to walk out and see your employees. But I think sometimes just having a conversation with them about, something not related to work and just keeping it a little bit lighter, if you will. But, everybody's cramped. Everybody's having to go home and not go out. And so they look for people to talk to. And so I think that's a good way to try to, at least raise the spirits.
Right.
Try little things. Like I had a suggestion from an employee. Why don't we have some sort of a T-shirt made for our employees that says, keep America, we're keeping America stronger. We're part of the team
Right.
that producing. Haven't thought of the slogan just yet, but that they can all wear like as a source of pride to say, hey, we're in this and we're part of this group that's considered vital to the economy, and we're working and we're doing our best. So I don't know if that is something anyone can afford, but
that's a great thing to kind of unify people around the cause of that. So, well, one of the things I think through is this technology right here has created an opportunity. I would encourage everybody listening, when you see this and you get to the end and listen to this segment, if there are 5 or 6, I'd try and find 5 or 6 owners or executives in the industry that you really trust, and get on a Zoom call once a week just to talk about where you're at, what you're doing, talk about a little bit about business, but also just talk about where you are. And I think as y'all are saying here, you would encourage each other to help move you through, because one of the things is the worst thing in the world in this moment is to feel like you're alone in this endeavor. And you're not. I mean, we talk about this every time we get on a webcast. MTI has got 260 plants and 64 suppliers, and we are all in this together. And we're going to weather the storm as best as we can. MTI is committed to bringing you everything you need with every resource we have to help you go through and really fight through this and muscle in and make a difference and, fend for your customers and stuff. So find yourself 4 to 5 other members and do a Zoom call once a week or every other week just to catch up and hear what do you think is going on and get that thought pattern back from everybody. Well, Mary, Glenn, and Buster, thank y'all so much for your time. I'm glad you could be here and take the time. Members, thank you for listening from around the country. Just by the way, one of our members, Rob, I'm looking at it right now. He just said that his bank this morning commented that 5 to 7% of the payroll protection funds have been allocated as of this morning. So they are beginning to see money go out the door. So that's a great sign. And hopefully we'll see 100% of that go out soon. And everybody listening on this call gets your share, right? And gets prepared. Everybody, thank y'all for listening. What I want to remind everybody is next week on Wednesday, we just put it together this morning. We're going to be hosting another webcast with Ed Engelhart, Bob Ferry, and Mark Buval from NADCAP, PRI, who are going to go over this recent NADCAP notice that just went out on how they're dealing with COVID, how they're going to extend, hopefully, certificate dates and deadlines and stuff. So very informative thing. If you're in NADCAP or thinking about it, you're going to be watching this webcast next Wednesday at 2 o'clock. A notice will go out tomorrow for you to RSVP for it. So you want to be on that next Wednesday. But thank y'all very much again. Thank you for your time bringing into your living room. I'm Tom Morrison. You're not strong. You're MTI strong, people. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.